Without further ado, we have Tyler and Greg from Campus ESP and Dordt University. 9 stats to support your family engagement strategy. Thanks all, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. Really looking forward to jumping in with my colleague and partner for today, Greg, and share how important families are in the admissions and enrollment process. So we're going to move through as quickly as possible to answer any questions that you all are using that Q&A feature for. But just a little bit of a background on both of us today. My name is Tyler. I'm an account manager here at Campus ESP. We'll explain what we do in a minute, but my background is 6.5 years in admissions, usually as a regional rep up in New England, and then I joined the team here at Campus CSP. So shifting from taking all those parent phone calls into helping Greg take all those parent phone calls. And so I will happily shift things over to Greg and let him provide a little intro.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. So good to be joining you. This is kind of a dream come true to be presenting with Campus ESP. So this is going to be a lot of fun today. As Tyler mentioned, I serve at Dordt University. I've been at Dordt for 19 years. I used to serve kind of in a dual role between coaching and an admissions counselor, and then 6 years ago became the director. So a little background on Dordt. We are a private faith-based institution in Sioux Center, Iowa. Sioux Center is a town of about 8,000. We have had record enrollment 6 years running, so no pressure there as a director of admissions to keep that going. But we've grown from 1,300 students to just a little bit over 1,500 in the past 10 years. And one thing that makes us really unique is that 40% of our students travel over 400 miles to get to campus. So even though we're in the Midwest, the third largest state we get students from is California. And so they're coming from all over the country. And so communication is very important for us as an institution. And so because, you need to build value and trust with those families as they go through the admissions process. I'm also entering into the parent stage of searching for colleges. My daughter is a sophomore in high school right now. So that's fascinating to watch. I just want to point out the pens. Campus ESP always has the best pens, and the turn parents into partners. That's just a great tagline, and I think a theme that you'll see throughout this.
Amazing, Greg. I appreciate it and learn something new every time. I was born and raised in the great state of Nevada, and so I will have to let my West Coast family and friends know that Iowa is a good spot for them to head to. So great background of Dordt, how folks get there, why we're kind of in the room today. Just want to break down who Campus CSP is. So we're a parent engagement strategy. We're here to provide a web, mobile, and email experience, really take the lift off of Greg and his staff to engage prospective family members. We know that so much of the college going decision is, yes, centered around that student, but who's in that circle of support includes family members, includes school counselors, definitely friends, and we want to be that place for family members, grandparents, counselors to have access and updates just from Dordt to make them feel as though they're all headed and making this collective decision. We are working with more than 350 universities and colleges. There's actually now more than 7 million families across all of our portals, where we're really excited to see the number of prospective families throughout the entire country who are receiving updates from such great institutions. And so why is this important, right? Dordt understands that parents are a part of that process. And as both of us have on a pin, that parents are partners. So wanted to start and kind of set the scene with why Greg felt that families were important to engage, and some of the tools and tactics that you're using to guide families as they help support their students on their way to Dordt.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important to, as an office, we talk a lot about culture and mindset in our recruiting. And for many years, obviously, that has focused a lot on the student. But over the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years, that really has shifted more and more towards parents. And I think in the past, our mindset has kind of had a negative connotation towards parent involvement. You can see some of those negative terms on there of helicopter parent, lawnmower, snowplow, whatever you use in your office. We've all used different terms for parents. And so as we were talking in team meetings, just like me noticing like, oh, we're just very negative about this and why. And so I just really felt like we needed a mindset shift to seeing them more as partners than like fighting against them. And so just involving them in the process is so important. And it really has become a family matter. For us, our lifeblood for enrollment is campus visits. And so when I started back in the early 2000s, we'd have a visit day of like 50 students, and we'd maybe have 60 total guests because 10 of those students brought their one parent, and everybody's like, whoa, that's weird, you brought your parent along. But now if we have a campus visit of 50 students, we probably have over 125 guests, because almost every single student's bringing at least one parent. Most are bringing two, and sometimes they even bring their grandparents, which makes for a good time interacting with the family throughout the day. And so just engaging them as a whole family, because they're going to be making that decision together. And so just embracing it as an office and just talking positively about that's so important. And then we also talk about how, yeah, you're asking for a parent's probably two most prized possessions, their kids and their money. And so you're asking their 18-year-old to move out from their house where they have had control of over everything, to move onto your campus, where they are no longer, making every decision for their child and involved with every decision. And so, that's a big move for that family. And then of course, money, higher ed, there is a cost to it. There's a value to it, but a lot of families see it as a cost, and so they need to part with their resources. And so you're asking for two things that they probably think the most about during their day. In there too, you hope that it's they see their child as the most important and money as second. Sometimes in conversations with parents, you see that flipped around. That can be a little frustrating. And so as an enrollment officer, how do you kind of navigate those conversations? It's going to be very important.
Definitely a lot easier to work with families than against them, right? So they're there to support that student, and receiving that buy-in, one, great to help turn the student into hopefully enrolling at the institution, but it becomes so much easier when that student feels as though this is a place that I know that my parents will trust me with some discretion to be at, and we love to see that. And those are a lot of the conversations that I've had with you, Greg, so really excited to dig into how it's going and really some of the research into why we believe what we believe. So just to set a little bit of a stage, we work with a lot of different partners. We have really collaborative processes here at CampusESP. One of the things that we love to do is talk to prospective families. I think that so much of our work is guided by the experience of parents and students who are going through the admissions process. So we reached out to close to 12,000 different family members, prospective students, grades 10 to 12. They were pursuing more than 40 different institutions, and asked them what that experience is like. What are their preferences? What do they want to hear? What do they want to hear more of? What do they want to hear less of? And what's the format that they would like to receive that? So this is kind of the base work of what Greg and I, it helps shape our conversations when we're working together on what's the best way to relay Dordt content, but also why we are here today and talking about parent engagement across the world. So we promised 9 takeaways for you today, and I promise that we will get through all of them, but and they're not in any order of importance, right? So 1 through 9, this is an unfavorited ranking system. But that first takeaway, parent communications their expectations are higher than. I remember back to when I was in admissions during the spring 2020, and boy, howdy, was it different when I knew that students were around that dinner table. They were working from there, they were eating from there, they were talking to their parents nonstop as their parents were working from there. And what we found is that family members have increased their expectations. They got to see it, live it, hear it, understand it during the pandemic. And what we have found is that parents really leaned into this expectation of hearing from colleges and universities during the enrollment process. So right now, our number one stat here is that 88% of parents who are in that perspective lens want to hear from you all, want to hear from Greg and Dordt, and all of you joining us today, at least weekly. And that number still makes me sweat a little bit. It is a warm fall day, but just thinking about how much effort that would require. Greg, just really curious how you've seen the expectations of parents grow, change, what that demand looks like as you and your team are really on those front lines.
Yeah, I would say that the stat doesn't surprise me. I would say, 5, 6 years ago, we already knew that we needed to be contacting parents. But I agree with you that COVID definitely ramped that up. But as an admissions director, that was always very daunting to me of like, how do I communicate with with these parents once a week, and we have data flowing in, and how do we get this communication to them? And so we used to do it, the old school way where we have a CRM, we use Salesforce, but we don't have parents as contacts. And so how do we get them an email? And so we would actually export, I feel a little embarrassed to say this, but we export our list into an Excel, load it into MyEmma or MailChimp. We'd write our, emails in there or send it out. And it was just super clunky, super time consuming, and we just didn't have the personnel or the time to do that. And so a lot of times that kind of just got pushed to the side. We all know that that happens in our offices of like, ooh, this is gonna be a lot of work, we're not going to focus as much on that. And so yeah, when we demoed with CampusESP a year and a half ago, is like, oh wow, this is just seems like a very seamless platform that we can operate out of. And so we were excited about it. And this is like, I would just say that CampusESP has allowed us to reach this communication stat of communicating with their parents once a week, whether that's an email or a post or just different things. And so yeah, it is so important.
And definitely really help kind of guide families in their level of expectations, right? So maybe you were falling a little bit short on that aspirational aspect, and now folks are really resonating with what is coming to them on a regular cadence. That number two for our take, I feel like David Letterman today. So takeaway number two, email is a prerequisite for communicating with prospective families. I know that while I sit in one end of that millennial generation that has feelings about emails, it's still my primary mode of communication. When I think about what my mom uses as her primary mode, I was on the phone with her last night and she was like, "Did you read my email?" And I was like, "Mom, like, why are you emailing me? Like, we can call, we can text, you can FaceTime me." But no, she has to write her email. So parents are opening emails, they're sending them. That's their spot where they would like to receive information from colleges and universities. So while their student preferences may look very different, I think Greg, one of the things that's important to you all as an institution is to meet parents where they are. If they're letting you know that email is this number one spot for them, hopefully that is where you're really directing your effort.
Yeah, I am that generation, or just getting to that generation with a daughter who's a sophomore. But I have a lot of friends who have kids in college already, and so yeah, it is. They're like, oh, do I want to, go into this or go into that? No, I just want it delivered right to me in an email, and I want to be able to read the most important information and determine what next steps I need to do. And so parents have a lot of information coming at them from so many different places, whether it's the high school, the grade school, just different companies that are advertising to them. And so to sift through that, you just need to have it in one place. And it's really nice just to have that email, like, okay, I can go back to it and I can look at it and when I have time, because sometimes you get an email and it's like, oh man, I don't have time and I need to go back to that. And so it's just really nice to have sitting right in your inbox. So
Absolutely. And kind of that starting place, right? Like this is probably the lowest barrier to entry. And so using email as a building block really helps support a full communication strategy. Who knows? Maybe Dordt and Carnegie and CampusESP will be coming to you live on Blue Sky next year. But until then, we're going to continue to email. Takeaway number three, tailor that communication to improve access. So what do we mean? How do we meet families where they are? We did this study and really found that the preferences were based off of a lot of factors. One of the most predominant factors in the preference of communication channel was on socioeconomic status. So when we look to see who is engaging in different formats, looking at that high income bracket, really loving a direct mail and parent family portal experience. On the other end, that lower end of the socioeconomic stratosphere that we're seeing here, text message was that most preferred. And really, I think that when we think about communicating with parents, it's meeting them where they are and really thinking most broadly about accessibility. So with a parent who is really trying to support their student, does not have reliable access to the internet or to their mailbox, like their number one choices are probably not direct mail or a portal login for them. They want that to be sent directly to their phone. And so we're just curious, like how you've seen shifts from direct mail. I know that our CEO sent out a newsletter and had stacks and stacks of paper for his students who are going through the admissions process, all the way through a really like mobile approach that you're leaning into.
Yeah, I think it's, a multi-level approach that you have to take. I would say that direct mail isn't dead, but it's also different maybe than it used to be. I know that we send a lot of postcards in the mail because when I think about the mail in my house, if it's in an envelope and I don't know the sender, I typically just toss it right into the recycling bin. But a postcard can get your message out there right away. And so whether it's the student or a parent, it probably sits on the counter for 2 to 3 days and people see it and like, oh, what is this? Let's pick this up and look at it. And so we still use direct mail, but postcards are also a little cheaper to send, which is nice. The text messaging, we currently don't have that. I know Campus ESP has an option for text messaging, which I'm definitely interested in. And so that might be the next step for us. The parent portal that Campus ESP provides is so nice. I don't know about your guys' campus, but a lot of times to get changes on the website or add a new function in your website takes an act of Congress. And it's like, well, this maybe be next year. Well, we don't always have time till next year. And so going live with Campus ESP, you have a built-in family portal that looks just like your institution with branding and families can log in there and have so many choices of what type of communication. And then, yeah, the last one, I don't underestimate telephone. It probably depends a little bit at what stage of the process you're at. If they're an inquiry or a recent admit, maybe not, but as you get more lower in the funnel as far as almost ready to commit, calling a parent can be very successful. I just had an admissions counselor tell me yesterday, she's like, hey, I called 5 parents and I got 2 of them to register their kid for a visit already. It's like, sweet, that's awesome, because they sometimes take more action steps than what their kids do. And so, so it's a multi-pronged approach. And so you need all of these in order to be successful.
And even from a more broad perspective, I'm going to make a couple assumptions here, Greg, and so I apologize in advance. But just thinking about like when you were on the road so much, I'm guessing that maybe the way that you went from high school visit to high school visit included a paper map. And just thinking about the shifts, I appreciate the laugh, right? Like I've heard stories of this, but just now when counselors are planning travel, they're doing that on an experience where they're getting their information on their phone. When families are showing up for a visit, they're probably looking for that confirmation email on their phone. And so much of the shift to mobile, I think, is opening the door for accessibility and finding more folks to be a part of the process than before.
Well, I'm going to date myself, Tyler. So my first trip that I went on, we literally had a binder and I printed off directions from MapQuest. I traveled to Canada, and so I had turn-by-turn directions printed out. So thank you for that. It brings back some good memories.
I wasn't going to give a free promo to MapQuest today, but that's where I was headed. I've heard the stories from some of my colleagues who have been in the field for a lot longer than I have. The other point that I think is really interesting is when you're trying to recruit a changing demographic as far as the entire country goes, what are the shifts that you need to make as an office? Where do you lean more into communication preferences but where do you see different populations kind of coalescing? And one of the things that we see is that first gen families really desire and have a strong need for a lot more communication, whether that's explaining the admissions process and for them, like explaining from the start, why do I need to take this campus visit? How does this make the process easier for me? How do I understand after leaving a visit what my steps to apply are? That first gen families continue to be continue to prefer text messaging and phone calls, and I think that that's one of the most important conversations that we're seeing across all of our different institutional partners is that demographics who are headed to college are constantly changing, and there's more and more first gen families who are really being those cheerleaders for their students. And Greg, I know like you've had a lot of really great success at Dordt with enrolling folks from further away. It could be a continuing generation or that first generation, but just any thoughts on how you've had to change some of your recruitment tactics?
Yeah, no, I think it's just good to meet a family where they're at, and so just asking good questions of how they can be helped through the process, and then letting that inform your more broad communication. So I think you're totally right. We need to listen on the front end, and then okay, we're hearing this from families. Maybe we should release some information like the application process of like, oh, this year it seems like students are really struggling to know what they need to do once they apply. Well, okay, well, how can we help with that? Or applying for scholarships, like what are those? I was just in our campus ESP portal this morning, and with data, sometimes it's hard to track or identify. But I really appreciated it. Just there's one little tab there that shows the percentage of first time or first generation students, and so you can drill right into that. Okay, who is this group? Because yeah, that's not something we always capture in our CRM, but it seems like they're willing to identify themselves as that in a portal, which can be extremely helpful. So
Absolutely. One of the things that you said that really sparked joy with me is just thinking about how different every class is, right? I'm sure that you could say that class of 2023 needed this extra support, which was different than that class of 2022. And I'm sure that as that class of 2024 for everyone today continues to shape, you'll find some of those areas to lean more into or push back on the brake pedal a little bit. But each one is really so different than the last. Keeping on moving. So, takeaway number 4, all prospective families care about the same topics, but where do their allegiances fall throughout the enrollment process? And is there a change in interest based off of grade? So, looking now at that top 10 pieces of information and topics for families, I wouldn't say that too many of these are surprising. Greg, any surprises on here?
yeah, I wouldn't say surprises. I think the thing that just stood out to me is that 4 squares are blue, and no other has more than everything else. And so, how are you adding all of these different boxes into your communication? Because you do need to talk about all of them. So
Your starting framework, right? At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, families are sending their dollars and their students to the institutions. And so, what are the communication topics that relate to both of those, right? Like, even if a family has such a high ability to afford the institution, how can you continue to support them on what finance options look like? How do you break down financial aid packet for someone who's never seen one before? And so, not surprising is seeing how many of those kind of underline back to the dollar figures. I think the one that's really interesting to me is just how little there is on the actual application, right? So admission requirements, application processes, and timelines in that top 10, but that is the third most important topic. So much relates back to money, but also so much relates to who said, like what sets you apart as an institution, academics, updates, programs, and families are always interested in how are you going to keep my students safe. So no surprises there in the top 10 topics. Anything that you want to add, Greg?
no, I think that's good.
All right, perfect. When we look now at those topics for families by grade, we'll start to see some shifts. So looking at who is interested by the 10th grade, who's interested in the topic by the 11th grade, And here's really where we see a lot of differential. So for me, it's the left side of this looks at things that everyone is interested in: costs, academics, requirements, safety. And on the right side is when we start to see some of those differentials. So those sophomores, families of sophomores are looking at what kind of community are you building on campus? How can I begin to start to think about affording this? Those families of juniors, maybe they're taking their first campus tour, and so they're seeing your food service and dining programs in real life, and it's becoming more important for them, kind of thinking about what's separating you all. And those families of juniors certainly interested in how strong of an academic area, when they're thinking aspirationally about their kid, they're like, where are they going to fit in and what's going to be the best place for them? And where we see the biggest shift is in that 12th grade. So this is the biggest impact on those who are making those decisions. How do I pay this tuition bill? But what makes the institution different? And so, Greg, just want to hear from you on how do you kind of filter your communications by class year? And what are you looking at that is specific to Dordt, kind of building some of those 12th grade, what makes you all different?
Yeah, no, that's really good research there. We did some of our own research this year as well, and some things that we came up with from parents of admits. They want, yeah, they want the data, but then they want the stories behind that to like show, okay, is this actually happening? You can say that you're different, and but they want proof. And so I love that on the bottom there. Be honest, because if you're not honest in your communication, if you send out all these emails and communication on your website, and then they come to campus and that doesn't match what you've been sharing all along, it's going to be pretty obvious very quickly. And I would say a lot of colleges, I mean, we provide the same services. So a lot of times I say probably 90% of what colleges do are similar to every other place. But what's that last 10% that makes you so much different? And so getting that into your message is so important. And so like for us, professors, who are you going to be learning from, who is going to be influencing you during your time on campus, what internships, parents love to see, oh, you have a guaranteed internship, or you're going to work in these different places while you're a student. And then the data piece that came back to us this year that really stood out was outcomes. What are they going to do when they graduate? And so you have that parent, that family who comes on campus and their daughter wants to major in art, and the dad is sitting there, well, what is she going to do when she graduates? Well, you better have some data behind that and show what is possible when they graduate with a certain program. And that's what families are asking. And so I always say, share the data, but then tell the stories behind it. And so yes, you want to talk through the bullet points here, the admissions process. Don't assume that they know everything. Cost, financial aid is extremely important. Campus safety, just with the sad news last night, that just it's on top of people's minds. And so campus safety is extremely important. What resources, mental and physical health, how are you going to care for their child while they're on campus? And then, yeah, I mentioned already professor relationships, job, internship resources. So you're really building a trust throughout the process, but it's really in grade 12, their senior year, when it's like, okay, now we're coming down to it. We need to make a decision. And so I really want to know what is the difference. And a lot of times Dordt, we're not the cheapest school that they're looking at. Typically, if they're looking at private institutions, we're still $3,000 to $5,000 more expensive than the other school that they're considering. And so we have to build in enough value and trust through the process that they're like, no, I still want to go there because I know it's going to be a great experience and it's going to be a transformational experience. And so you need to show that through your communication.
Absolutely. Your second to last bullet point really resonates. I remember back when I was answering a lot of phone calls in April, and I always had like a Rolodex of professor stories that I could tell. So a family called and was like, I'm interested in art, for example, or for me, I was a poli-sci major, and being able to really lean into all of those resources that you've built in through outstanding faculty and institution. I think that your parents and families are super interested in what the stories that you're going to share with them. Takeaway number 5, Greg was just talking a little bit about cost, but lean into how you communicate about cost to families. This is so important, especially for private institutions. Where are you building that value? Where are families seeing the return on their investment? So we found that close to 60% are that say that paying for the education will be difficult or very difficult. So how can you understand where folks are coming from and at the same time continue to relay the information to them that makes this feasible? This was a major increase from a year ago, and so I think that all of us probably will admit that as the global economy changes, that this number may not go down next year. Would not be my prediction. No longer in the prediction business, but just one to make there. And so, how do you make sure that families feel a part of it? To me, it boils back down to where you started us today, Greg. Families are sending their students, they're also paying for them to be there. So who's thinking about this? First gen families, families of color, low income families. So just curious, like how as you continue to recruit a diverse class from different experiences, life backgrounds, does cost kind of play a factor in your office?
Yeah, I think just the education piece is so important of what's available. And so, like, especially for like first gen families, the three that you have down there is sometimes they think they see the sticker price and they're like, oh, whoa, there's no way I'm going to be able to afford this. And so getting them to go through the process is so important because like in the state of Iowa, we have an Iowa tuition grant of around $7,500. And so if a low income family would qualify for that and full Pell, right there is close to $15,000, and say they get an academic scholarship of around 12, there's 27,000 of the $36,000 of tuition. And so, them looking at that total price tag, they're not going to understand how that can come down very quickly. And so, but you need to have that conversation with them. And so I usually tell our counselors, and I think we're doing this more and more, is you need to have a conversation about cost earlier in the process instead of waiting till, oh, yeah, we'll get to financial aid later. No, you need to have that conversation and see what their fears are. And it's, and I tell our counselors too, like, don't be scared of that conversation. Just because they're concerned about cost doesn't mean they're going to say no. You just need to help them. You need to help show them how to walk through that process.
Absolutely. I couldn't say it any better myself. So just thinking about that level of education, right? Thinking about how are you educating what's available. And we continue to see that financial aid and scholarships are really that top and in the top 5 factors of a decision. Again, those same 3 main demographic groups come up when thinking about scholarships in that decision process. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because I think that you really painted a really great picture of how much is about education. And once families kind of see what it means for them to make those informed decisions, but you being able to share the different resources is really where you're moving the whole conversation towards education further.
I will say though, the 4% not a factor. We don't mind those families either. So it's nice when that doesn't have to be part of the conversation. But also it can be a big conversation for families who do have the ability to pay. It doesn't mean that they're going to be willing to pay that. And so their EFC or whatever the new term is coming out here in a couple months. But just because that's a high number doesn't mean that, like, oh yeah, I can just write a check. No, you still need to show those families what the value is as well.
Definitely. I think it's student aid index is
there you go. Thank you. I mind blank there. I'm trying not to think about the FAFSA and student aid index.
I understand why. Getting into into the thick of things. So takeaway number 6, parent experience matters in that college planning. Where are you welcoming them in? And this to me is one of the least surprising again slides, but good to back it up with the stats. So how important are those different experiences? Looking at the campus visit as that first most, I think that no one is surprised by how important on-campus visit is, but when we ask families what is important to them, the quality of the school's communications with parents and family members are. So Greg, if you want to get on a short soapbox just on how you really view parents as partners, I think that this is what the numbers speak to. But just curious your perspective on how you've made some of those cultural shifts.
Yeah, I think, here just like emails need to be well written. They can't have spelling errors, grammatical errors. You need to know your audience. Don't get too cute with subject lines at times. Just get to the point. And so for this one, yeah, my example would be I have a daughter who is in sixth grade and then one who's a sophomore, and they're at different schools and vastly different communication between the two different schools. One school, we get it, like the grade school, we get an email and it's very nicely written. It has who sent it and nice pictures on it and just gives us the information we need. And then when my daughter was looking to high school, the emails that we get from them, like a lot of times it was poorly written, didn't have like a signature line of who the email was coming from. It was just the school. It's like, well, okay, who's sending this to me? A lot of times the fonts would be different in the email. Like one paragraph would be one font size, the next paragraph the next font size. I had like zero confidence and I was super frustrated because I'm just getting these clunky emails. Or they'd send one out and then 10 minutes later, oh, sorry, the link didn't work in that one, here's the right link. They were not building in value and confidence in me because their communication was not quality. And that made we still sent our daughter there and the teachers are amazing, but my feedback to them is like, man, you're losing students because you don't have good communication and it's just not quality. And so it does make a difference because parents do have high expectations.
Absolutely. And thinking back to where we started, I think quantity makes a difference, but equally matched by a strong quality makes a big difference. So diving a little bit into another study that we did, this is our most recent case study on folks who are leveraging Campus ESP for student enrollment, just like our friend here, Greg from Dordt. Looking at some specifics here, we know that students with engaged parents are more likely to submit the application. So just across the board, when we look at students who have a parent using Campus ESP platforms are 4 times more likely to convert from inquiry to applicant. Greg, I know we're going to get into some really like Dordt specific numbers here, but wanted just to open the floor to you thinking about how early you're communicating with families, whether that is whether they're the family member of a freshman in high school or those who are really working on that application, really building a welcoming environment from the jump, just kind of why you made the decision to invite parents in early and all.
Yeah, I would say before Campus ESP, I wanted parent email addresses, but I was kind of like, oh, I don't know how much we're actually going to use this. And now with Campus ESP, Melody is our parent relations specialist. And her and I are like, how do we get more people in here earlier? And so we're trying to drive engagement to Campus ESP as soon as possible because we now know that we have a platform and a place for them to go to instead of like having it. And then you have that little guilt in the back of your mind of like, I know I should be communicating with them, but I'm not, and they know that I should, and I'm not, and so now it's just like it gives me relief of like, oh, okay, they're in the platform, they're getting materials and communication, whether it's newsletters or campaign drips or whatever, they're getting communicated with, and that is just extremely helpful.
I'm going to put you on a bumper sticker that Campus ESP is a guilt-free experience for you and your families.
Hey, there's a new one.
Yeah. So really where we see this paying off for you is welcoming families in early. And so this is a snapshot, a pretty live snapshot of the experience that your families are seeing. They are looking at these campaigns that really help drive the conversations around that dinner table. And so if a parent is receiving an update, they're able to log in and see that their student needs to still submit the application. It's curious, like you have a couple in your family who are starting this process. And so what do your conversations look like around the college going process? And how do you make assumptions about what those conversations look like for those who are submitting applications right
Yeah, well, I mean, my first conversation with my sophomore is you have to go to Dordt. No, I'm just kidding. You have options. We need to show you the value of coming to Dordt, and I think this, like when a family parent goes into Campus ESP. What I love is they can designate like, okay, where are you at in the process? And so then we can tailor our communications around that. Also, Campus ESP finds or writes content as well. So it's not like I am fully responsible for providing every piece of content. And so that is extremely helpful. Of like, I think I just saw one the other day of a post of 14 best questions to ask during a campus visit. We didn't write that. You guys did or found it somewhere. And so that was extremely helpful. Another piece of like, depends on where they're at in the funnel. I had a conversation with our academic enrichment center the other day about students with learning disabilities and what kind of support they can provide. And as I was sitting there, the first thing that comes to my mind is like, oh, Campus ESP, we're just going to put it on there. And so I asked them to write an article and they're like, oh, are you serious? I can do that. And then I can get them the information. I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. So we have people on our campus that are providing, information that we're posting on Campus ESP, which is amazing.
I think definitely just you're shifting that conversation forward and inviting as many people to be a part of it. And that is, I think, where you're seeing the results pay off. So looking at some more Dordt specific numbers here, how families are building affinity within Dordt. We took those articles that you were referencing, packaged them all up in a newsletter. And last year, you didn't have to push a single button to send 82,000 newsletters. This was done automatically for you. We're tracking those open rates of 61% for fall 2023, showing that families are clicking in at 12%. And the family members who are the most engaged, I think to no surprise, which maybe is our second theme of today, is those incoming first-year families. And so to me, this shows that you've built a strong communication channel from the minute that a family was interested all the way until their student showed up on that first day and beyond. And really welcoming the family to Dordt, building the relationship, not just with that student, but making Dordt the center of that family commitment. Takeaway number 8 here, students with engaged parents are more likely to enroll. Greg, you said you're not going to turn away any high ability to pay applicants. And I'm guessing that you'll continue to take some family members and students who will continue to deposit at Dordt. We'll say we'll keep going and keep growing, right? You said that this is the highest enrollment that you've had, and that has been an upward trajectory. And really, we have seen that working with different partners, that yield rates are 9% higher than average when that parent is using Campus ESP. So wanted to dig in and share how this is, what it means for you. And so just looking at some of your numbers here, that yield rate for families who enrolled last year at Dordt, 45%. From Campus ESP, that typical yield rate for Dordt students on their own without that family connection, 32%. So making a major impact here, looking at how many families of inquiries really had those conversations and moved all the way to admitted, 50% of them. So just wanted to get your take on the performance, right? We've seen the why and the how, but like, what does this mean for you as an institution as you continue to invite parents as supporters and partners, but really like growing the size of Dordt's classes?
Yeah, I think that this just helps provide the opportunity for the family to have a conversation because I don't always see, or my daughter doesn't tell me about her emails and messaging that she gets, and so now having the parent also getting very similar communication and talking about the process, I think as a family, it provides me the opportunity to have that conversation. We're sitting around the dinner table at night, maybe once a week because we're so busy with so many other activities. But then it's like, oh, hey, let's talk about this tonight. And so you have, as a parent, you have some information already versus trying to get that out of your child all the time because maybe they're super talkative and they tell you everything, but not all teenagers do. And so maybe they're sitting there and they're like, I don't know, sure. And just having the information that you can ask them good questions, I think is very helpful. And just, yeah, that parent nudge can help a lot of just like, hey, you know what? We're at this point in the process. Maybe we should get an application in. Oh, I noticed that we got a communication that we still need your transcript. Okay, I can help you with that too. And so seeing them more as a partner versus kind of fighting against it has just been life-changing for us. So.
And it's working, right? Largest first year class to date. And we hope to see that again a year from now.
Yeah, the board is on campus right now, and I'm pretty sure they're not going to say recruit fewer students next year. I'm pretty sure it's going to be more. So
Probably not going to hear that from them while they. So I wanted to provide one other example of how families are engaging with that content. See, there's the push for completing the FAFSA when it's available. We want to make sure that families are up to date with strategy and changes in the whole college going process. But families are hearing from Greg and the team throughout their life cycle, the enrollment cycle, and receiving close to 24 individual personalized emails, really tailored based off of their experiences, what they're hoping to hear. And Greg's not lifting his finger on sending.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I would just add there, Tyler, is just the integration piece with Campus ESP. We've added different technology pieces to our stack over the last couple of years, and it doesn't always go super well. It can be frustrating, but Campus ESP was a totally different experience. Even just like implementing the whole portal, and then my whole first year that we were in Campus ESP, Joby, who's one of your account reps, he's awesome. Would be like, hey, maybe we should write an integration between Salesforce and Campus ESP. And I'm like, it gives me nightmares of talking about integrations, and because we use Salesforce and Datatel, and it's a mess. And I'm like, no, integrations don't work well. We don't have the manpower to do that. And he's like, no, Greg, it's easy. And it literally was within a week we were integrated between the two systems, and now we can send out personalized communication based on their where they're at in the application process. So.
Guilt-free and anti-nightmare. Those are the two that I will be walking away from today. Our final takeaway for everyone is just really looking at how much of a predictor on student enrollment is parent engagement. So those are the champions at home. How are you building the support? What are you doing differently that really invites the families to engage with institutions? Seeing that those family members who are in the top quartile of engagement have students that are the most likely to apply. We look to see how many people in Campus ESP go in and are regularly providing you, Greg, with updated information on their preferences. I just looked and saw that close to 64% of your enrolling class had indicated to you who they were, what their preferences are. And so really being able to use Campus ESP as a predictor is important, but I would say outside, yes, we see that the predictors are even stronger for folks using Campus ESP than not, but just most broadly, when you're building those champions at the dinner table, when you're talking to families on move-in day, that is a familial and family experience. And so just wanted to as we wind things down and move to Q&A using the Q&A feature in your platform, I just wanted to see how you continue to work with families. Where do you see some of those wins or stories from families who say yes, we felt the most connected to Dordt and more connected to Dordt than anyone else, and as a whole family unit.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would share is, about 3-4 years ago, when families would be moving on campus, students would be moving on campus, and parents are with them, and we would have not a lot, but a number of just frustrated parents of well, I didn't know this, and you didn't tell me this, and it's well, yeah, I was in this communication, but you probably didn't get it, or your child didn't pass it on to you. And this past fall was absolutely amazing because parents were coming in and oh, thank you for all the information that you gave us, and we feel like we're well prepared, and all the emails go out in my name, and oh, you're Greg, hey, thanks for all the emails this past year. I'm like, you bet, it was you are welcome for that. And so it was just very comforting to be okay, families know, and if they didn't, it's like, oh, are you in Campus ESP, our online portal? And they're like, no, we're not. Well, it's also for current students, and so now you can get all the information and know what your child is up to. Another way that we use it, kind of late stage in the process. I worked with Joby on this to get an automatic weekly report of any students who were still in the admit stage and hadn't deposited in June and July. If their parent had logged on that summer and were still looking in the portal, then I let our counselors know, hey, here might be a good parent contact to make, because even though their child hasn't decided yet, their parent is still looking at some things on the portal. And so, yeah, we definitely enrolled a few more students because of that.
I'd love to hear it. Definitely taking all of the tools that are available, and just hope that when your sophomores looking at schools, most particularly Dordt, that many of them are in Campus ESP. So our final things here are just making sure that you're engaging with families. Greg said, here's how you share with parents who need to know the information. Opportunities to learn more are through our summit series and checking out some of our research available. And all of these are free resources for everyone who is really looking to lean into parents and families more in their enrollment process. So we're going to wind things down and open the floor. Greg and I have been going back and forth and could do this for quite a few hours. It's both of our admissions genes who are worked many a college fair when all you had to talk to was your neighbor. And so we could talk to each other for sure, but want to make sure that if anyone is joining today with questions, that we're getting those answered.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. We've had a couple of questions come through, both in the Zoom Q&A and also in the Whova app. So one, actually, you just referenced some research and some tools and resources that you have available, but there was a question about, is there research on the influence or involvement in the recruitment process by spouse or partner of adult students? I know we've spent a lot of time talking about parents, and there's just a question about spouse or partner's involvement.
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely we'll turn the floor to Greg. It's not a population that we work really closely with here at Campus ESP. When we think about a lot of our work is on traditional undergrad, also a fair amount of transfer students, but not so much the adult online or graduate populations. I think that those, at least anecdotally to me, those conversations look a little bit different on the dining tables, and so while it's not our primary focus as an organization, Greg, I'm just curious, like, your thoughts on the adult populations.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say we use it more for undergrad as well, and so we're not currently using it at the grad level, but something to think about. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know of any kind of all-encompassing or national research that we've completed, but I know Carnegie has a couple of different research options to better understand specific student type preferences and needs. So if interested, don't hesitate to reach out. Another question we received while you were presenting was, a common message we hear is that email is dead among prospective students. If email is in the mix of communication tools for engaging with prospective students, would it be advised to include parents' email addresses in those messages sent to their student, in addition to a separate parent or family conflow?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in first. I would say we've made the decision to make them separate, just because we want the student to feel like, hey, we are just communicating with you and we're not CCing in your parents. And so this is for your eyes. And then we'll send a similar message to parents so that they can kind of have those conversations together. And so, yeah, I would much prefer to keep those two separate.
And really, like, when we look at a lot of like the strategy behind email sends, that's what we're seeing the most frequently is a separate communication track for students, letting sure that they know what they need to do, and really saying here to like communicating to families differently. Say, here's a resource we told your student about. Here's what's available to your student. You can still send them a checklist of what's missing on that application. But I think that where we see a lot of really like ownership and accountability in the enrollment process is on separate communication tracks.
Thank you both. With just a couple of minutes left here, we have two final questions. One seems to be pretty specific from Jen. Prospective parents received 24 emails. That was a reference in one of your slides, Tyler, throughout the enrollment cycle. Is that cycle in reference to 10th through 12th grade combined, or in each calendar year there on the prospect list?
Yeah, great question, Jen, and really more so on the enrollment calendar year. So thinking from the application going live August 1 all the way through moving on to campus in August the following year, that's when we see that 24 number. If they are coming in even earlier than August 1st, then each enrollment year before, they're also getting 24.
And I think too, like on their platform, parents can actually choose how much communication they want to get. So that's nice as well of like, okay, it's your choice then to receive all these emails, or you might say, no, I just want to check the portal and I don't want any emails. They can do that too. So you're not getting, I'm not getting emails saying, why are you sending me all of this? And I'm so frustrated. It's like, oh, just change this one thing in your portal and you will no longer get an email. So.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, put it in their court for sure. And then final question we have here is any additional recommendations for attaining parent contact information when it can be so difficult?
Yeah, I mean, if there was a number one question that we get asked, this is it. If there was a silver bullet to it, we would trademark it. I really think that this is an all-out effort. So at a few different institutions that I was at, we tried to make our RFI as short as possible because we had built out a really robust sequence through sending the student more forms as they warmed up to the institution. So keeping an RFI short, but saying, all right, great. Now, one, feel free to tell us who's a part of your decision-making process, or two, here's a form you can forward directly to them for information. One of our biggest encouragements to institutions is include a who's coming with you on a campus visit question, because that to me is usually someone in that family unit, and that's where we see a lot of early parent contact information coming from, is in that campus visit form, and making sure that you're not overwhelming them, right? So saying who's your family and then delivering on their expectation, both equally important. And then the number one is having it as a field on the application, required on Common App, required on Coalition, and if it's not on your institutional application, please stick it there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Greg and Tyler. We really appreciate your time. Up next is starting right now with the connection with LinkedIn, reuse and recycle video content for EDU. So hope to see you in just a minute. Thank you all.
Thanks for joining.